So now we are not muted anymore. Hello,
All right.
guys. Welcome.
Hello. Welcome to the class.
Welcome to the class. Today, I have lovely green. Go down. So today we have Valentin here. Okay, so let me introduce Valentin. This is a best programmer in the world. He is the absolute god of programming. Okay, he knows everything. Even when he's he stopped drinking right now, but when he was completely and utterly pissed one night, he was so pissed that he, instead of going to bed, he sat on his computer, wrote complete code for TikTok, committed it to GitHub, then forgot about it all, and then some Chinese person was like, hey, what's that? That's interesting.
Yeah.
I can make business. He's so good, okay?
True story.
Okay, so and now, of course, he's too good for us, so he went to these amazing companies' journeys. He was just in Portugal, I don't know what the fuck he was doing there, but it doesn't matter. So Valentin, first and only question today for you is, how much do you miss me?
Average level.
Average level. This is the top guy. If he was some average programmer, he would miss me a lot, but Okay, so today we are here to talk about Django, the backend stuff. So we had a little session. We tried to figure out how this whole backend thing works in Django, how it's organized, especially for the CodeTown kind of system that we are implementing. And we are a little bit confused. We understand that there is Nginx and there are these unicorns and other mythical animals. So we got that bit. But then, when you look at this code of the backend, we're like, okay, what the hell is this? What can I change? What can't I change? So maybe we can start by asking you, okay, can you guide us through the structure of the Django backend? Give us a little bit of information, what the hell does it all mean? Where are the controllers? Where are my APIs? Where, give us like 15, 20 minutes, little introduction to the backend, so how you see it as
All right. I mean, generally, my advice in this case is also to go through the Django documentation. I don't know if you went through it, because that's what I did. So basically, just advice for whenever you learn a new, let's say, framework or whatever, go one time through documentation like a book. So just have an idea of where things are. You won't remember everything, of course, but you have an idea of what the framework is capable of and what you can do with it. And then later on you remember, I think I saw somewhere in the documentation that I can do this, and then you search for that. And that's, so far I found it's the best way to actually get a grasp, and then you don't even need really Stack Overflow or whatever. Then you can just go to the documentation and all the information you might need is there. But generally for the structure, right, so what do we have here? All right, so I'll go folder by folder, I think.
Okay, sounds like a plan.
Yeah. So in the common folder, basically this is all common functionality that's required for different parts of the software. So it's something like, I don't know, like often in programming you call it helpers or utils or something like that. Any code that's shareable and it's required for more parts of the framework resides here. So for example, I don't know, we have like whatever, some main constants. Of course, the constants are going to be also in other folders. We have, I don't know, the exceptions. These are all, custom exceptions, because let's say the framework has its own exceptions that are built in Django REST framework, but if you need to add something that's more specific to the application, or you want to change maybe the message, or you want to change the status code, then you make your own exceptions. So this is also common and is going to be used throughout the application.
Can you override then built-in exceptions?
This is basically kind of like, you cannot override, but you can build your own ones, and then from here you just import them.
Okay.
So it's not really overriding, but it's just adding new ones aside.
Okay.
So in a function you would possibly be able to throw that specific exception.
Exactly, yeah. So yeah, if we have unauthorized access, which is, okay, I don't know exactly why they wrote it here, because Django REST framework has its own unauthorized access. But yeah, you can just kind of add some of your own stuff to it. So, all right, what else? So here in the first ones we have DRF custom. What was here? All right. Authentication. Okay, so these, I don't know exactly why some of them are here, but I assume they're also used inside the other DRF folders. ID converter, okay, I can explain that. That is, this has to do with, wait. Yeah, so basically, in order to kind of hide a bit the, to kind of secure in some way, let's say so, the database, you know you have these URLs, right? And when you query for something in the database, you query by number. So you say, hey, bring me all the information that is in this table at row 1 or with ID 1 or with ID 2. And in order to kind of mask this ID, you hash it. So instead of 1, you use like you hash this integer 1. And then you get like a 5 or 7 length string of mixed and alphanumerical, whatever. And then basically, based on that, let's say even if someone who, I don't know, if some third party has access to your API or whatever, or can see in the URL what you do, they won't have an idea, let's say, how many items you have in your database, or which exact item is under this number, or whatever. So it's not mandatory, but it's encouraged encouraged security practice to kind of hide a bit whatever you query in the database so people cannot make some impressions. Because I mean, in order to attack an application, you need to gather a lot of information about it, and any small information might be helpful to the hacker, let's say so. So this is what this does here. Basically, it transforms those IDs to the alphanumerical encryption. This will have another class here, I think. Fields. So fields will be needed for the DRF, for the Django REST framework.
What is DRF?
So Django REST framework, and again, here I'll recommend, because I cannot explain it all now, you need to go through the documentation with that, because Django REST framework is kind of, it's more like an adapter for Django that makes it, let's say, that makes it a better API. So let's say Django as a framework, it has a lot of things that you might not need if you build a separate front end, because Django comes with everything included, right? It has its views, so you can make a whole application just in Django. Here for CodeTown, we have 2 separate applications, which is the backend and front end, which means a lot of the things in Django in the backend we actually don't need. We don't need the views. We don't need to configure all the templates that make up a web page. So that is all not needed in Django. So the only thing we kind of use Django for here is as an API. And Django DRF is, let's say, they improved on the existing Django API and basically made it more suitable for being a REST API, let's say so. So it's kind of like it comes in addition to Django. It comes like a wrapper on top of it. Its main simple functionality is to convert, to serialize and to deserialize. So basically,
but that was one of the questions, because you know, people keep asking me, what's this serializer? What's this serializer? So maybe we can dig into that when you mention it right now.
Yeah. I mean, I can give you briefly. So serializing. So you know, the REST frameworks, they work by transferring between them JSON files. So basically, you keep all the data in the JSON format, and let's say natively Django doesn't work within a JSON format, so it needs something that kind of transforms that into something that our Django database can understand and can directly communicate with it. So basically, what the main thing it does, serializing means it, basically encoding or decoding kind of in this JSON format. So deserializing, let's say a request is coming in from the front end, like, hey, do this for me. And this request contains, I don't know, you want to add a user, right? And it contains the JSON file with all the new user information. So what deserialization does, it gets this JSON file with the user information, it transforms it into something that Django can understand and can already add natively to its database, because, let's say, Django has this PostgreSQL database it works with and has this ORM, whatever it was, relationship model, something like that. So basically, they have easier ways to communicate with a database rather than just doing SQL queries. So in Django, you don't need to select this from that in order to get some information. You just write model.get this. So for example, they have this wrapper also around the database. And Django REST framework knows how to communicate with that wrapper as well. So basically it gets the JSON information and it very easily transforms it, and you can add it and you can do whatever you want with it and add it to the database and so on. And then serializing, it means it gets this information from the database and it structures it in this JSON format so it's ready to be sent back.
So if I have a user information in PHP, okay, so it's sent to me by JSON, okay. So first I think I say JSON decode, which gives me an array, okay, and I have the key values, and then I create the object, okay, model, user, and then I say user name, get me that from the array. User surname, get me that from the array. User email, get me that from the array. And then I say model save. So I guess the serializer is
doing it quicker in a way. It's more optimized for that.
A smaller number of steps.
Yeah.
The serializer is for models.
It's for what?
Models.
Pretty much, yeah. You deserialize and you add into models, let's say, if that's what you want to do, for example. I mean, you can add some different logic, but as we will go through the code later, you will see that, yeah, basically it has to do with models directly. And it makes it much, much, much easier to do things generally with Django. Because let's say you can do without the DRF. You don't need it, let's say so. But it's much more difficult to set it up Django in its native way to do the same thing rather than having this kind of framework on top of Django that is specialized and is optimized to work as an API.
It's kind of like Laravel and PHP. Laravel is more advanced than just the REST framework.
Yeah, and I know whether Laravel, I think it has some innate already things that take care of that. But yeah, so these fields here that you see, so basically what you do with the DRF, and maybe it's easier if I actually show already some, okay, these are monos. So let's say while we talk about serializers, deserializers.
But do you have to write your own serializer, deserializer for every type of model that you are using?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you write it once and then you can use it as many times.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So basically, I'm just want to find, okay, so we have here serializers. So views, this is basically a Django thing. So views is when you send the request to the server, it goes first through the view. And normally in Django, with that view, you can render a template, which can be a front-end page. In our case, what we use views for is because, I mean, views are there in any case, and you need them to get that first request in. We use them to further serialize and deserialize, basically. So if we look here into views, so views, that's the first step that happens after a request. So, I don't know, let's take the user, for example. For example, yeah, I mean, okay, validate username. So you send a request that validates whether the username is available or is correct or whatever. And what you do here, so this Django REST framework has these classes it inherits from. So yeah, depending, I mean, that you have to go to the documentation because it has different classes and one builds on top of each other. So it depends on the use case that you wanna. You might choose a simpler class or, so the difference between these classes you inherit is how much control you have over them. So if you want full control over the request and you want to modify it a lot from what a standard request would look like, then you choose, I don't know, you choose an API view that allows you that. So here, for example, it's a bit more control over here because we have to specify this GET request. So we say, okay, whenever we get a GET request at the URL that this view is engaged in, and then we can see that. In urls.py. So let's say. So yeah, so whenever our server sees that something tried to contact it at this validate username URL, and then it triggers this class here, the validate username, which is exactly this one. And it says, so, okay, so if this request that's coming in is a GET request, then, then use the serializer to basically transform the data. And which data you use from the serializer? You use all the query params in this case. So all the parameters that come along with the GET request. And basically to go a bit deeper into that, we can check here. So what I have to say and why you need the documentation is that this DRF serializer has a specific way of doing things. So for example, it has a specific way of declaring things, and sometimes if you just look at it and not knowing what exactly it is, then you won't understand why did they do it like that. So let's say it's a bit of a cryptic, more mystical way of approaching. For example, here they don't do much besides just declare the serializer class, but actually what happens in the background, a lot of these things happen in the retrieve API view. I mean, maybe not in this case, but overall, you need to go through the DRF documentation to see exactly how they structure it. So let's say in this case, we use the validate username serializer, and these are the fields. So this is what you saw above as well in the other folder with the different custom fields. So just like Django, in this database has specific kind of fields, like, I don't know, like integer type, or it's a char field or whatever. These exact same fields are also in DRF. So basically you need to declare them here so the DRF knows how to deserialize them correctly, because in JSON files everything is strings, right? So everything is either strings or numbers, or okay, you can have Boolean, but let's say, I don't know, you have some specific kind of integer or whatever, you need to be able to change it from the JSON file and communicate with the Django database. So what you say here is, okay, we expect in that request that validates the username, we expect the type and username parameters, because we saw there that the query parameters are sent. And the rest happens basically on its own. So the only thing you need here is toRepresentation, which is a built-in function in the DRF in this serializer view. So toRepresentation basically is the function that is called when you want to return the response. So toRepresentation is how you're going to see. So let's say I contacted this API on the validate username endpoint, and I receive back a JSON file that says message success or username valid or valid true or something like that. So all this, the final step happens in the toRepresentation function.
Do we get that response on the console?
I mean, if you use something like Postman or whatever, like anything that you use to see the API response.
So you make a request to that to that root file, so to that URL. You have to submit the 2 bits of information, type and username, to this function. It will check, convert it first into integer and string, okay? And then says, okay, now that I do the validation, I will return something back to that whoever called me. So what you said, if you use API, it will return to whoever called the API mobile app or something. Or if you use, Postman, you will see the results.
Yeah.
And here you control what those results are.
Yeah.
What do you see?
Quick question, it's not, it might be stupid. OBJ is obviously like your parameters that you sent along with the request, but what is self in this scope?
Self is all the information that this class has. So we have this validate username serializer class that inherits from the serializer class, which is a DRF class. So self contains all the methods in the DRF serializer class. So that's why a lot of it is also hidden from the eye, because most of it happens in the background because you inherit it. So here, let's say you won't see usually, I mean, depends on the complexity. But because for example, here we have these create and toRepresentation classes, and these both are inside the serializer class. I think we can even take a look inside it. But it's rather complex here because that's their DRF, whatever. But yeah, basically you're overriding these methods there. So the create method is always used to create an object in the database, let's say so. I mean, of course, you can do it for something else, but its main function is in the create object. You do all your logic that actually takes this information from the JSON and creates an object inside the database. So as here you can see, for example, we have the reset password serializer, and the only thing we need for that is the username. So we say, okay, username is of type char field inside our database, and okay, we have these parameters, I mean, that you'll see in the documentation, but for example, write only means that when you return the response, this field is not going to be visible. So write only means you only accept these fields in, but you don't return them back in the response. And you have read only, which means that this field you only return in the response, but you actually cannot write anything to the database with it. But that's going a bit into detail, so let's keep it simple. We have this create function. So what they do basically here is, let's say, yeah, we received this post request, hey, reset my password, here's the username.
Question, how do you know it's a post request?
I assume, I mean, that's just assuming that for a reset password request, it's a post. I mean, I don't know exactly, and you can see it. If you want to check for sure, you go back into views, you look for the reset password, and we have, okay, so here you see, absolutely minimal. So if you look at it without having any idea about DRF, you're like, what the hell is going on here? So in this case, we know, I mean, if you know a bit the documentation, you know that create API view takes care of only post requests, because post request is associated with creation, so that's why. So you have the create, above there we had the retrieve, and that's why you use the get request. And the thing about DRF, you can do it and you can use it in many ways, right? So we could have also, let's say, like you've seen here above in this thing, that they mentioned this get request specifically there and then did some logic here. The same way you can do a lot of the things here. You can just define post, so basically you accept the post method and you do everything inside this view. But that's, I mean, that's again like in programming. There are good standards and there are bad standards, let's say, of doing something. You can do something, the same exact thing, and the result might be the same, but you can do it in a more efficient way or legible way for someone who sees that code. And since DRF, they like to keep it a bit, let's say, more simple and more minimal. So here they just declared this reset password. We know it's a create API view, which means it's going to handle a post request. Then,
so, but you know what I like to bother people, if you go back to that previous page, to that one, because you know when I read as a PHP or C program or something like this is a variable called serial class, and it gets assigned a value from whatever that thing on the right is. And I don't know what that thing on the right is. It looks like some sort of class, you know, but is it a class? Is it a function? Is it a variable? Maybe it's a really good example to understand that this, I understand what you're saying about documentation, but what happens when this gets executed?
all right, so you get that post request, I mean, which is everything that happens is inside this create API view class. So that's the parent class where all the things take place. So what happens, you get the post request. Here you just tell, because this is also a variable that's inside this create API view. So it's a variable that belongs to it and you just override it. So you say, hey, whenever...
So I can't put x equals reset password.
No, this is a standard. You need to write serializer underscore class.
Okay, so these are reserved variables that I need to read the documentation and make sure that I use the correct ones.
And if you can see below, besides that, you have also these permission classes, which is also a built-in variable that you need to override that tells you, okay, what permissions are going to be used for this API endpoint. And besides that, you have some more. I mean, there's some more different things like, whatever, HTTP method names. But
there are many of those.
Yeah, there are multiple things, but normally this one you need all the time because it says, hey, Django REST framework, whenever you see this post request, please use the reset password serializer for it.
Yeah. So basically, this create API view has a variable serializer class, and then you assign what type of serializer you want to use in that specific request that you are processing.
Exactly.
So you can use reset password in this example, but in another example you will say save user or update user or whatever serializer you do.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
You all got that?
Yeah.
All clear?
So yeah, basically you tell it, okay, use this reset password serializer, and the moment that the post request comes in, you assign that to it, then DRF does its whatever things there, and then at some point it reaches this create function. And here, basically what it does, it creates this reset password request. So first of all, okay, it tries to see does this user actually exist for whom we want to reset the password. So if, basically if it exists, all good. Otherwise, you return this status false, message reset failed, whatever. But yeah.
So where does this user underscore username come from?
That's also, this is how you query things in Django. So I said before that you have this wrapper around the database. So instead of writing here, select username from this where username equals that. So you just say, hey, please in the user model, which basically is the representation of the user table, it tells, hey, please look there. Any user object, and user here is probably a foreign key, and that's why we have the double underscore, which means look inside the foreign key, look in the relation that this foreign key has to another table, and in that foreign key table, find me the username.
Okay, now that makes sense, because that looks originally like just a variable.
Yeah. So these are these are all things that that's why I'm recording again documentation, because everything will be clear. Because for me at first it was also mystical, and then I was trying just by understanding, but you cannot do just by understanding. You need to read, because they have their specific approaches to doing things, and this is one of them. So let's say we had two foreign key IDs. Let's say the user was a foreign key, but then it was linked into username, which is also a foreign key to another table, which breaks into first name and password. Then you write another double underscore and say first name, for example. So this is kind of like traversing through the tables with these double underscores.
That means that username would have its own fields as well in the database, right?
Yeah, there is a field called username.
And then it has its own parameters.
That would mean if you would see a double underscore after the username, it means that username is a link to another table. But here, because it ends at it, you see that means it's just a field. And because of the way this is structured, we have the user, but okay, we'll come back to that later, because you said to talk about different users that we have. But okay, anyways. So yeah,
just one more thing, because when I was asking before, that line, so if you scroll up just a little bit, Valentin, please. So this reset password serializer is a class.
Yeah.
Okay, so when we have that function before, it does link it to this class here, which makes perfect sense. And then in this class, we have variables and we have functions then that we can use, or the serializer can use. Makes perfect sense. Now this get is a function that gets stuff from the database, I assume. And the parameter of that function, so this is weird for me, okay, because you have, as a parameter, you have some sort of equation, this equals that, okay? So it's not what I see in a PHP. I either pass a parameter, that's my parameter, use that. But
it makes sense. Like the left side equation is the field name, and the right side is your actual variable that you sent with the request.
Yeah.
So you are sending the variable username, but that variable that you are sending, okay, again, not like PHP, you can call it whatever you want. It has a naming convention, so these two underscores here are for the reason. If somebody like Valentin doesn't tell me that, and if I don't read documentation, I can look
have no
at
idea.
this
You won't
for
understand.
hours, and I will never in million years figure out that's what they meant.
Yeah, and if you just Google double underscore, it might be that you won't find it immediately either. So.
Yeah.
I mean, then you can end up with Lodash and stuff.
Yeah.
So I think it's very, very important to remember these tricks, because that saves you so much time, and then listen to this bloody advice to go read that documentation. Even if you don't understand it, read it once, so you will pick up, there was something about double underscore.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Validated data is part of serializer?
Yes, so this is, you can see it here. This is, you can name it anything, but by convention they call it validated data. So we have this create function that we override, right? And overriding it means that we also accept the same parameters as the parent function has. So basically this create, let's say you send the post request, and during the deserialization, this serializer calls this create function, and it sends to it this validated data. So here you always will have these parameters from the request. They've always been validated data. Why is it called validated data? Because it's already validated. It means the serializer already made sure that the username is indeed a char field, so it's correctly a string, and you can also add your own validation above. So you can add the function def validate, which also is a built-in function in DRF, and then you can add your own custom validation. And whenever the data that you send with the post request is going through the serializer, it will first check based on your validation and only then proceed to create or whatever else it has. So validation is built in the serializer itself as well. And that's why you also write here char field, for example. Because now, if you will send something that's not a char field instead of username, it will complain, it will tell you, hey, this is not valid. This is not actually a string, it's an integer, it's an object, whatever.
And then with custom validation, you can be like, okay, it needs to be more than five characters or something.
Exactly, yeah. So you can add whatever else comes in your mind in that case, yeah.
Yeah, and these are all functions from the serializer.
Exactly, yeah. Everything you see here, it's all functions that you inherit from this main serializer parent.
Okay, so maybe without going any deep, because I think this is obviously a huge topic, maybe we can go back to the overview, so see other stuff, what's in there.
All right, so so what do we have? Okay, we were here. So yeah, basically, I mean, that's for example the field. So here you define your custom fields for serializer, because let's say Django doesn't have a phone number field generally. So it means you can create a field that will only accept phone numbers, and in the serializer you add in this field its custom validation and all that. So it knows always to accept phone numbers when you send them in a request. So you don't say string anymore, you don't say integer, but it's a phone number. So you kind of create your own type of field.
And then you need to make a serializer phone number field.
Exactly. So here, when you go back then to serializers, you will initialize username, phone number equals serializer's phone number field that you made yourself. And then it will trigger all the functions that you define there. So for validation, for initialization of that thing, and so on.
But okay, do I need to import that, or if I put my custom fields in the common, what you said before, is it going to be just available?
You always need to import. So you will always need to import from anything that's common here. That's the way we share files in Python generally. We always import them.
So put it in common, but also import them.
Yeah. But you put them in common because you know exactly we have common things, and wherever you are, you don't have to remember, oh, where did I put it? You know, it's always in common. So.
Okay.
Is that the same way, like certain information gets shared, like a global state of like variables, like user, like being able to access the user model at all times? Is that also important at like the file? Or?
The user model, I think it's different. Although no, the models you need to import as well.
Okay.
The models, everything you need to import basically from other places. So from where they defined. So for example, the built-in user model you import from Django itself. You say import from Django auth, contrib, whatever, import user model or something like that. So everything is done via imports, the whole communication between files. So so here they define their own custom fields that are needed for the application, whatever. Mixins. Let me remember what mixins were, but it's not something you use that much anymore generally.
I find this word quarks very funny, and I'm like, what the hell is a quark?
Yeah, quarks is when you, I don't know, do you know destructuring arrays and objects?
Well, I know that they are structured, but...
no, that you can destructure them. So you have an object, and then you can just destructure it and extract all the key value pairs, let's say.
Okay.
So what quarks does, it means you don't know how many variables you're going to take in this function, but you put these quarks, and basically no matter how many variables you're going to send in the function that are key value pairs, it will save them all in these extra quarks. So this is basically in order to be able to accept unlimited number of parameters in the function. So for example, I don't know, like for setRise, I might get only one parameter inside it, but I might get 5 parameters. So all these 5 parameters are then saved in the extra quarks so you can access them.
Okay.
And you have quarks and args, and often you're gonna see...
So args is for arguments.
Arg is for arguments. That's when you, so qargs accepts key and value pairs, but args only accepts values.
Okay.
So like the difference between an object and an array.
Exactly. So args transforms into an array everything you send into the function, but qargs gets also the name of the key value. So,
Yeah.
so I don't know. You might see it rather often. I don't see it right now here.
Oh, I just say args, that's fine, you know.
Yeah. No, because there, yeah, here, for example, because you see also this double asterisk, that is the destructuring. This means that when you send an object, a dict in this case, in Python we call it, when you send a dictionary, this double asterisk will unpack it. It means it will not be a dictionary anymore, but it will be basically only it will extract the key value pairs from it. So this is
basically it's casting one type of the object into something else.
Yeah, kind
So
of.
this is accepting any type of object and it converts it into key value.
Can you give an example?
Yeah, it's a bit more tricky because I'm also not the best, and I kind of understand it and I know how to use it, but it's a bit
No, but
hard
it's
to
all right.
explain,
We
but,
can skip that. It's just it's one of those.
but that's
things.
basically that's a Python thing. This is not a Django thing. It's not a DRF thing. It's a Python thing. These args and qargs. So yeah.
I mean, it's fine. Like,
Yeah, we'll see at least.
so basically,
Yeah,
it's
so-
like turning a dictionary into an object or something.
I mean, it's more like, yeah, it's.
It's not an object. It's
So if I were to do an
deconstructing
example,
object.
let's say, you see it here?
Yeah.
So let's say we have a that's, I don't know, it has a parameter a inside, a1. So now you could, how do we do this? So if I write, I'm not sure if that's going to work, but if I write double A, no, this is not, doesn't work. It doesn't work in print. Yeah, I mean, this better check yourself in any case. But yeah, it mainly works in functions. So I can say, for example, I can say this now. So that means now that B is going to be the same as A, but it extracted. So this double asterisk, it extracts it, but it needs to put B back somewhere. So that's why, for example, in order to extract it here, I put back, I configure it again in a dictionary. But let's say if I do this, I don't think that will work. Yeah, okay. So basically, it extracts it and it puts it in another dictionary. So it's kind of like it's useful in copying dictionaries, let's say so.
Just write A, what will you get?
If you just write B equals A, then it will reference it. So it's also going to be the same,
Same thing.
but then you point to the reference of it. But if you destructure it, then you make a copy of it. Because now if I have a reference, and now let's say I do B of A equals 2.
No, but if you change the value of
A.
the B will change as well.
But
because
if you
it's a
copy it,
reference,
yeah.
But if you copy it, then you will have the both values.
So both change if you do the reference.
Yeah, it means kind of like to imagine you get this dictionary, this object, you unpack it, which means you extract all the key value pairs and then you throw them into another dictionary.
Yeah.
So it always needs to be transferred into another dictionary. Sorry?
It will always be equal.
Yes, but the difference is that then if you do some changes in the first one, it won't be reflected in the other one.
But if you do change in the second one, then it will be.
Also not, because if you unpack them and copy them like that, it's kind of, I mean, at least that's how I know it from JavaScript. I'm not exactly sure that the same, but let's try it out. I mean, it's...
I mean, it makes sense. It's the same in PHP. If you store the user model into a variable and you change that variable, the user model gets updated, right?
Yeah, so you see now? So basically, there's two types of addressing things. So one is referencing to things, which means you point to that address in the memory where that thing stores the information, and whenever that thing changes, yours changes as well. But if you unpack and send them, you make sure that there's no more relation between them. It's kind of like, it's called also deep copy. I don't know if you heard, there's shallow and deep copy as well. Well, yeah, basically if you want to make sure that these two objects are not related, because later on it can happen that you do some changes in the first one, then you're like, what the fuck, why did the second one change? It means you probably didn't copy it correctly. So unpacking it and putting it like that, it means it extracts it from the dictionary and it puts it in another dictionary. So it takes all the apples from the basket and puts it in another basket, let's say so. But it still remains a basket with apples. So it's still a dictionary.
Cool. Okay, let's move on.
Alrighty. So, all right, so we have here these, yeah, I mean, we have some extra models that are common, like abstract base model. I mean, that's also, you'll find it in the documentation. Throttle that I added, that's for brute force protection.
So this models, the PY is the extra models?
This one here.
So for example, if you want to go to the user model, it's not here?
No, these are common models, and what abstract models do, abstract models is kind of like, it's helping you do inheritance with models, which means you can have multiple models, but let's say I have an employee, user, director. There are 3 different models, but they have a lot in common, right? All of them have usernames. All of them have a phone number, maybe. So then I make an abstract model that contains these username, phone number fields, and then I can inherit it. Okay. So I don't have to write all the time.
The global parameters of the models.
In some way, yeah. It's more like inheritance between classes, you know, when you have a parent class and a child class, and you don't want to define everything again in the child class. The same way here. So you inherit these parameters. So basically, wherever you'll see in the code later on that it uses this abstract-based model, it means all those models will have a creator, an updater, updated on, created on.
Yeah, so abstract classes in object-oriented programming are used to define what the classes must implement. Okay, so you never use abstract class to create a model or create an object from it. So it's the whole purpose is every class that implements this abstract class has specific rules that it has to implement. So these are the functions that you must have. These are the constants, variables, etc., because they're common. So you don't end up creating a weird user which is not compatible with a director or whatever he said. So it's more help for us to give us the structure, so we don't go away.
Yeah.
It is exactly extending.
It's exactly inheritance, but for models.
Yeah.
This is the parent.
This is, yeah, you can consider it as the parent, basically. It's a very stripped down parent because it doesn't have anything else, but it's a parent only that contains something that all models must have. So all models must have a creator, all of them must have an updater, and so on.
It might sound stupid, but can you extend or like do that with multiple classes and say like I want to have
Yeah, you can implement multiple
inheritance,
and you also have another thing called interfaces. So we might go have a session about object-oriented programming, like advanced, okay, to talk about these, because these are not. We don't need them immediately. We can do quite a lot without them. But then when the shit gets complex, then you want to have some structure. Then you say, hey, I want my classes to behave in a certain way, so I will link them to the set of rules that are defined in the classes, which are just to define those set of rules. All right?
Yep. Yeah, so here we have all the validator functions. So basically what I told you in the serializers, you can validate your things. So here are custom validation functions for whatever, I don't know, for emails, for... I don't know whether something is actually a float. I don't know why they did all that. I mean, I don't remember using them per se, but they're here. I mean, a lot of this code you're probably not going to use, but it's...
Why does everything has a yellow line?
It's something with... it's not defined. It's something from the VS Code. It's not with the code.
Yeah, those things, they are plugins, guys. So check your plugins, typically what you have installed, because I saw people using PHP IntelliSense, and then it underlines half of your code to say it's wrong, but it actually isn't.
Well, this is very strange as well, because they're just not defined. So, okay, well, this yellow line actually means here that, hey, you didn't import all these functions. So I don't know why. I don't know how it works without that, but okay, anyways, probably, I don't know.
Probably it doesn't work.
Probably it doesn't, I don't know. But yeah, basically this yellow line is here for a reason. You didn't import this thing, so it doesn't know what the fuck is a string type. All right. Anyways, these are some extra validators, but there will be some other ones later on. Okay, so here is kind of the This is the main folder that gets created when you create a new app in Django. And you don't really care too much about this folder besides the settings. And this is an approach they did. For example, now at my new job, I don't do it like that anymore with the settings, but okay, it's a valid way to go about it. So you store settings for different environments separately. So we have base.py. These are settings for everything. So it's the base. So these are the settings for the app, for the Django to work correctly. But because you know we have environments, right? We have a development environment, we have a testing environment, we have a production environment. So, and variables differ from environment to environment, so here you specify them. So while normally you don't really need this anymore because everything is configured, it's just good to know that, yeah, base is something that every environment needs. So these are base.py, these are the settings that Django usually puts automatically and you can add to them. So these are all things. For example, here we have the configuration for the REST framework. So for example, it's basically global settings for everything that you have in the Django application.
So the base is the most important one.
Sorry?
The base is the most
The base, it has all the default ones that are the same for everything, but these are also important because, for example, here you also, I mean, all of them are important. It's all important settings, and without them, the app won't work at all.
Yeah, but like
The base, yeah.
settings takes from the base?
No, it just adds to it, kind of like.
So, because I know the guys struggle when they were setting up their environment with these 4 files, but what is confusing me here is development and local. So development is for my development machine, but what is local?
Development is for the development environment in the cloud.
Staging.
Kind of, because normally you have development, you have local development, staging, and production, let's say. So in our case, I think we also have that. So you have local is your local machine. So here is everything for your local machine. Here is development, which is for the development environment where you upload things from your local machine and then you check whether they work or not. And you don't have staging here. So I think for
the staging.
no, the staging is this one, is the production, because staging always needs to be as close to the production as possible. Because staging is where the client tests your application, let's say so.
But the links and the development are to the staging website.
I think the thing is we changed.
You
to
change something,
stage
yeah.
Eventually, at some point, because we didn't have enough server space to have both a development and a staging server.
Okay, could be, yeah. But generally, we use staging. So staging should be always reflect the production level. So from staging, that's the next level after development, where you know, okay, mostly everything is working. The client can test everything on staging. If there is some still stuff to make it better, okay. But staging needs to be as close to production as possible. So then from staging, you can easily go to production without doing too many changes.
Okay. And
Well-
in the documentation of Django, there was, I was looking how to debug the backend, and there was something about logging. I have to import logging, and they have to add it in the settings.
We'll go to debugging after the break. So let's do the overview for next
Yeah.
10 more
Yeah, that's
minutes.
the question.
Yeah,
Which settings do I have to add logging to?
that's base.py.
That's base.
Yeah, yeah. And you don't always, I mean, you can use logging, but you don't always need it. I don't think I used it before for
just
for
asking.
debugging.
So
But yeah, generally,
add the-
everything that has to do with Django per se goes to base.py. Everything else that has to do with our environments, we put it in the specific environment file. So that's why you'll see, for example, in production, we only care about things specific only to our app, not to the Django app itself. I mean, of course, there are some things that are from Django, like this is from Django, this is from Django, but root URL, front root, shop root, whatever, these are all that have to do with our app. And here, okay, these are also, for example, Django, but it's things from Django that have to do with the environment. We have Celery here. So Celery, I mean, you won't really need to use it that much, but Celery, basically what it does, it adds some asynchronous functionality to Django, which means that there are tasks that might load up the server a lot. So let's say I don't know, let's say we want to create a PDF and then send it back to the user on the server, right? So the user is like, hey, I upload you this image, make me a PDF out of it. So this PDF generation task, it takes a lot of time, right? So you cannot do it on the Django server itself, because otherwise all the users that use the Django server are going to have a freeze in those moments because it loads up the server. So what you do is you use something like Celery, and Django tells Celery, hey, I got this task, do it for me on the background. So Django is always only busy with receiving requests and sending back responses. It try not to put anything else on it. So even like things like mass emailing that we use in the app, this all happens through Celery, because Django is usually, you don't want to make it too busy with looking for all the emails and sending emails because one user wanted that, because that means if, let's say, 3 users at the same time are sending emails, then the server is just going to freeze. It's just going to, no one will be able to send any requests to Django in that point. So for sending emails, and that's the only thing we use Celery for, if I remember correctly, in this application, you use this kind of, it's called, how is it called, like kind of like task manager, something like that, task scheduler. So basically you tell, so every time, I don't know, anything that requires an email, anytime you log in a new user and the new user needs to receive an email, that confirmation, Django is like, hey, Celery, please take care of that. Please, you send the emails, you do whatever there that has to do with that. I'm here just to send back the response, okay. So Django will send the response, and then maybe in 1, 2, 3 seconds, Celery will also do its job and send the email. And also what you can do with Celery, which might be, I don't know if they use it here, might be useful, you can schedule tasks. So you can schedule, hey, every time at 12 p.m. send an email to that guy. So all this, yeah, like cron jobs, yeah, exactly. So all of this, it happens with Celery and Celery schedule. So for yourself, usually don't need it. Celery has only to do with email sending from in the app. URLs, these are the main URLs, so these are the top level URLs of our application. So as you can see, we have the admin, so this comes from Django itself. This is anything that you access in the admin interface of Django. And we have, the rest are defined by us, so accounts, task, finances, communication, blockchain, CBS, and all that. So this is the parent level. So this is kind of like URL inheritance, let's say. So here in the parent, you tell them, hey, include these URLs. I cannot just click on it, but basically any URL that's inside CBS URLs will start with CBS at the beginning.
Yeah, so CBS slash.
Yeah. So you kind of like do it here, you split it up for better organization. Yeah, and we have this WSGI, we don't need that. That has to do with, I think, asynchronicity, but we don't use that at all. All right, so then media and templates. So media, basically this is where everything that has to do with media is stored. So all the profile images, all the stuff that the user uploads, that's images and all that, that's all stored in the media folder, on production, on development, wherever. And then this media URL is saved in the database. So then you access it from the media. So what you can do, I mean, what was before usually a good practice is to have this media on a separate cloud provider or something like that. Maybe you heard about Amazon S3 or like, I don't know, Google Cloud, whatever, storage. So usually you can use this to store the media in some external parties. We don't do that because of security issues and because it's a governmental thing and all that. Sorry?
Why wouldn't it be in the front end?
Because the front end only requests stuff from the back end. So we don't want the front end to have access to the media because, let's say, when you upload something, you don't upload it through the front end. The front end just sends a request, please do that. And then the back end uploads the media file. So it uploads it somewhere where it is near the back end. Of course, you can put the media folder near the front end, wherever, but you cannot upload in the front end itself. The front end is just a code available to anyone. Front end should not have too much logic into it. As much logic as you want, you try to put it in the back end.
No, but this makes sense because if one user uploads the task picture, all the other users need to see the task picture, so it has to be stored at the back end and be available. Yeah. Whoever makes a request, show me the task and show me how it looks like.
Yeah.
So it's a custom user uploads
Yeah.
go here.
Yeah, but that's also just an advice for the future. Try to keep the front end mainly for displaying things. Backend is what does the heavy lifting and what keeps all the logic and application. So as little possible logic in the front end. So let's say if you have to, I don't know, sort documents, don't sort them in the front end, sort them in the back end and then receive them sorted. So that makes it much easier to separate the concerns. The front end is there to display stuff. It's not there because it's not there to make heavy operations and all that because it runs in the browser. The backend runs on a whole server, so it has more power and capacity to do all these kind of things. So right, templates, that has to do with all the email templates and whatnot. So everything that gets sent in an email is a template, and then it gets replaced with it basically has some kind of places where you can insert variable names and all that, and then it sends this in an email. So templates is purely email. So all the email, whatever.
If I want to make a new email, I'll make it in the template.
Sorry?
If I want to make a new email.
A new email format, yeah, exactly. You add it to the template. Right, and V1, that's basically our API. So that's where everything API related is stored.
So maybe we skip V1 because we want to have a break in a few minutes. So what else is?
That's it. The V1 is the main other thing. I mean, the rest I can just go briefly. I mean, static is the static files that are required for the admin dashboard of Django to run. So we don't care about that. Requirements, well, that's all the packages you need to run. So it's also split by environment because depending on the environment, you have different requirements. Local DB, we don't care about that. I don't even remember what that is. Fab file, I have no idea what that is. Yeah, I don't think that was there before.
Some sort of like global constants or whatever.
I don't know. I don't think that was there before.
Wasn't that being common?
I don't know what that is. I think that's something new. Or, anyways, you don't need it. You don't care about that. Environment, okay, that's where all the Django packages are. So everything is its own environment.
Not something we play with, right?
No, environment definitely not. You shouldn't do anything there. Fab file, honestly, I don't exactly know what it is, but failed parent. I think that's something auto-generated probably. Yeah, because these are server settings.
I
like,
think they are auto-generated.
Probably. And manage.py, well, that's the main way to interact with Django from command line. So whatever, like, I don't know, we probably used it before. If you wanna make migrations, if you wanna a database and so on. So that's the main, and you can add then your own commands later on. Like you can, I don't know, whatever. You can add basically your own commands like create super user. But if you wanna do something else on the server, but that's you're gonna read in the documentation. I don't think you need it now. So then we have only V1 left. So.
Okay, so then it's a good time to have a 5-minute break,
Yes.
and then we'll dive into V1, the APIs, which is obviously where
It's the meat.
Meat.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So 5 minutes, guys. Thanks, Valentin, for the
No
good
worries.
session so far.
No.
Okay, guys, we are back now. So, as Thomas was saying, we are getting into good shit, V1 APIs. But actually, I'm going to throw a curveball here, okay? So, rather than going through each one of these, okay, so I want to make an API, all right? So I have the existing API, let's say user submits a task, okay? So, but this is a task suggestion. So I guess that user would, from the mobile app, a mobile app calls the API and says, okay, I want to create a new task suggestion. So I'm going to have a task name, task description, an image, some sort of location, let's say those 4 things. Maybe there are a couple more, but it doesn't matter, okay? So this is my API, which already exists, okay? So I want to make a similar API in order to suggest, let's say, activity, okay? So activity would be same sort of thing, okay? So I want to create a name, I want to create, description, I want to say location, so, but it's some sort of activity, let's meet up for chess. It's not exactly a task, but it's something like a completely new feature, okay? So maybe, Valentin, if you don't mind, let's say, okay, let's say where is this task creation thing where administrators typically create a task. How would you go about this? How would you create a new API from scratch, which is very similar to the one that we have? So maybe we can kind of outline that process, and then by doing this on an example, also learn how the APIs work.
All right, so we want to add activities generally.
Yeah, we want to add activities which are extremely similar to adding a tasks, okay?
Mm-hmm. So first of all the things you see here, these are Django apps, we call them. So they are created via a specific command. I think it's Python manage.py start app and then the name of the app. So basically what that does, it creates the basic Django structure for some, because if you can see, all of them here, they have very similar structures, like whatever, blockchain. So we have the migrations, which are the database migrations, basically all the information about the database and the models. We have the views. We have some whatever here. What is it? Tests, models. So basically, if now I want to add an activity API, I will need to do the Python manage start app activity. It will create a folder that's very similar to these in the structure. Of course, it will be less because a lot of these, and I'll come back to it later, are added after that. But it will create a folder that has models.py, that has tests.py, urls.py, views.py, so it will create automatically everything.
Can you do it now? Can you just go to terminal and say, okay, create a bloody active...
Can't you just copy tasks, for example, since it's similar to...
Well, you can add it to existing one, but I'm just saying, okay, let's, for the illustration purpose...
Let me see.
I don't think you want to just copy paste.
Yeah, because Django needs to know about what's added to it. So that's the reason we use a specific command, because then Django internally makes some links between these. So it knows exactly, okay, this is a new app. I need to process it my specific way. So let me see, where is it? I think it's actually in Kotlin. Now let me see whether that's going to be like this. TV. No? Okay. So here we need to then go. It wasn't got down. Okay, sorry. V1. And here we need to do. Okay, so now we added activities here. You see it appeared, and you can see this is the default structure that every Django app should have. So it automatically created it for you. So you have your views, which are crucial to Django because this is where the APIs go through. You have your models, which are crucial to Django because that's where you store information in the database. And you have this apps.py admin, which you don't really need. I mean, admin.py is to add all the models to be displayed in the admin dashboard of Django. You have the init.py, which is a main file that kind of initializes this app. So whenever Django sees, aha, this app has an init.py, then I need to initialize it, basically. I need to use it. And you have the migrations, which now is empty, but later on they're going to be stored whenever you run Python manage.py and make migrations after you add some models. You can see that Django doesn't know that it has DRF, so it doesn't create anything DRF related. So that's why everything DRF related we need to create ourselves. So that would be, for example, serializers. So that's why we need to add a folder serializers that contains the serializer definitions. Here you can see they added the folder views instead of just the file views, which is basically is just a way to approach creating views. I mean, you can put all the views here, but you can make a folder and then have it more structured if you have different kinds of views. So this is the default. This is basically all you need to write a Django app. So then let's say with activities, the first step would be, okay, we create the model here. So what is an activity? How do we define activity? What do we store for activity? So then you create the model. I'm not going to do it right now, but usually, I mean...
But maybe you can just open that similar model, what I was
task,
talking about,
yeah.
like a task model,
Exactly.
and then just say you would have that and that.
Exactly. So let's say we have the task model here. We have task type, image, where is the main? Task, yeah. So you can see task inherits from abstract base model, which means, if you remember, it has the created, updated, created at, updated at. So besides these fields that you see here, it has also those fields. So the same way we would create an activity. And now,
Well, you don't have to do it. It's just to explain. Okay, fine. This is what we are going to do. So first thing, we create class activities with extends abstract model, and then here is comments of what all the functions we will have. So what I said, the description is going to be string, name is going to be string, location is going to be string, and then the date or reward or whatever. So you define that. So here you are saying, just if you go up, so this is, let's say, name. No, 290, there was name. Yeah, 97 name. So this we define it's
the name of the
string,
task.
maximum length, that description. Just above, it's text field, so it has many more, storage space. So this is what you find. And you said because it inherits the base, then we also get the functions, so create and so on.
Exactly.
Update, whatever, delete, I guess, basic functionality. Okay?
Yeah.
Cool. So what will be our next step? So we define these 4 or 5 variables that we care about, these properties.
Yeah. So you have your model then. You have your activity model. You know what the activity is in the database. So then the next step would be to create the views. So okay, you have your API, you want to communicate with the database, and all the communication happens through the views. So then, let's say where we have here the tasks. Where is the views?
So views is like controller in PHP.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
Pretty much. Yeah, that's normally in Django. If you don't use DRF, that's where all the API communication happens, where all the requests are getting in. So, I mean, the next step, I mean, you could, write the view, but one step that goes alongside with the views, you define the URL. So, where do we communicate? Like, what URL do we call in order?
What's the difference between this URL and the URL that you had in common?
Well, the URLs in common, or you mean the parent URLs?
Yeah, parent URL.
Well, the parent URLs, it means just that. Where is the parent URLs? I mean, anyways, the parent URLs not inherit, but they use these URLs. So you define parent as the top level structure. So in this case, we would also indeed go to.
We'll add activities to the
Exactly. Yeah. So we would go here, and here alongside tasks, you will
have activities over there, but then you'll have a new activity/new, but you don't have to say activities. So just new update.
And that's where that v1 dots.
Yeah, so exactly. So it includes these URLs that's inside the activity folder. So first, for example, it could be as a next step, you add here URL activity include v1 activity URLs. Then you go to the actual activity URLs, and then, yeah?
What's the difference between URL and path?
That's a more of an internal Django thing. I don't remember exactly, but both work. I mean, there is some standards, and path I think is an older way to do it. Now there is only one way, and I think that one is URL.
Okay.
But generally here, it's not much difference.
Okay.
It's just newer standards and older standards, something like that. So then you define the actual URLs and what they use. You define them inside these v1 activity URLs. So then we go, let's say, to urls.py. I don't know if we have the activity here. I don't see it. Yeah. In any case, but so URLs inside the activities. Now let me remove this because it's annoying me. Let's close blockchain. So yeah, so we have. We don't even have it here yet. Yeah, because originally Django only knows about the existence of these main urls.py. So this is just a way for us to structure our URLs, that we declare them here, but also have them inside the app to keep it separated, keep everything that has to do with one app inside that app. So then we would need to add here an urls.py file. So then you create it here in your file, you say, okay, urls.py. Then here you add, yeah.
So it seems to me that this little application, like what we are creating activity, we can take from this project very easily, I would assume, add to another project, because it's pretty much self-contained. So we just need to register it with the new Django and add one line to URLs, and we are done.
Basically, it's a module.
Yeah. So that's pretty much it. You add it here, you said, okay, URL activities, it will include the activities URLs, which is this file. So it means every URL that's here is going to start with activities, and the details, the main meat of it, is going to be inside this file. So we can see, for example, in tasks. So you can actually just copy something from here, just look. All right.
Yeah, so you have a suggest task, and in our case will be a suggest activity, okay?
Yeah. So you add what you need, the URLs here, and then here you have the view. So that's why in the next step would be inside activities to create the views. So basically when you call that URL, what class is going to be called? What class is going to execute all the logic that has to do with that URL?
And you would need the serializer for that, right?
Exactly. So first you create the view, and then you create a serializer for that view. So here we have in tasks, for example, I don't know, task suggestion was somewhere at the end, I think. Create image, delete image. So, okay, yeah, suggest task, retrieve, update, delete, for example. So here you would do the same thing inside activities. You go into views. If you want, you create a folder if you think there's going to be multiple different kinds of views. For example, you want, some views for, I don't know. Yeah, if it gets too long basically in a file, you separate it by structure. Yeah. But in the end, it can be, all of it can be in this one file. And here you would write something similar then to the task.py. So for example, if you want to make an activity suggestion, you make a class suggest activity. And for example, here I use the retrieve, update, destroy API view, which means it takes care, it means to this URL you can send retrieve, which is get requests, update, which is patch requests, and destroy, which is delete requests. So this will automatically inside it have this destroy, which is a delete request basically, patch, and get. So yeah, you define this, so you say, okay, when I access the URL in activities, then this view is going to be called. So when I access this URL in tasks, then this view is going to be called. And here you say, okay, so it will have these method names, get, patch, delete. It will use the serializer, and you define the permission classes as well. So the user needs to be authenticated in order to access this URL. The user needs to have an account approved, and the user needs to be able to retrieve task suggestions. And some of these permissions you have to define yourself. For example, these permissions are built in Django, which are basic, that the user needs to be authenticated, but this permission is defined by us. So we know who is allowed to retrieve tasks and who is allowed to.
So where would you add this? Is this going to common?
No, this is common is something that's common for all apps, but this is
Yeah.
specific for this app. So if we say we want a permission, hey, this user is allowed to create activities or to suggest activities, then you create a file permissions.py inside the, as you can see here, we have it in tasks, we have this permission.py, and here you define, this is also a DRF thing. So this is all in the DRF documentation. You define the permission. So always a permission inherits from base permission and always has this function has permission, for example. And has permission, then it's basically kind of, yeah, it always returns true or false in the end, whether the user has permission or not. And then you define the logic. So let's say, I don't know what an activity permission would be, but I don't know, the user.
So if username is called Andre, then he has permission.
Yeah.
If it's name Julia,
Then no, exactly,
Okay.
yeah. So you can define that in this function, and basically every time someone with the username Julia is going to access, then they're going to get return false, that Julia doesn't have permission.
Quick question. So for these permissions, the account, is that known by Django from where the request comes to who it is, or do you have to pause that with the request?
So a lot of the things, how Django works and passes requests, a lot of the information is already inside the request variable here. And some of it is inside the view QArgs. So the view QArgs are some variables that are accessed in our view. So in the request, if you always can see whether the user is authenticated. So when you authenticate inside Django, when you log in, then a lot of your information, your user information, is stored inside this request. So only Django, so that way Django knows who does this request. So you can be an unauthenticated user, and then you know it by looking inside the request, and it says that there was some anonymous equals true, which means this user is unauthenticated. But if you are authenticated, then you can basically you can operate with that user. So if I'm logged in and I send a request to Django, Django will know who I am. It will, in the request, there will be this user variable, for example, and it will know that, hey, this is me, this is Valentin. It has all this user data, so it knows exactly who is talking to him.
So now account.user.type comes from request.
This comes from QArg's account, and the QArg's account, let me see where is task list created.
That's what I mean. So how do we know where it comes from?
It comes from the view.
Yeah, so the view is the view that has to do with this permission. So then you have to go into the views for the task and see where this permission is used. So then, for example, we have it here in tasks, and the permission was is task list create allowed, is task list create allowed. Okay, so then the information comes from here, from task list create view, because this is the one that uses it.
Yeah. But then where is user.type?
1 second. Yeah, so it comes from here. So views, it means it has access to the variables that are inside the view that you define here. So if we here use view QArg's account, then
Oh, so it comes from the serial line. No.
self is what belongs to the view itself. And let me remember QArg's account.
Yeah, but it's the same thing in Laravel in PHP, okay? You don't have to manage sessions to identify users. That's managed by the framework itself, so it looks like it's very similar here. So there is stuff which is defined, so when you make a request, it passes some sort of session ID or some sort of thing which identifies who is making that request. And then you just say, well, is this authorized? That's built in, as Valentin said, so it just checks all the checks that basically does the heavy lifting for you.
My question is, how can we know what's inside account, for example, or what's inside user? So
I mean, you know, because generally, I mean, either you use a debugger and then you check, okay, what gets sent, so you open it up and see, okay, what's inside account if you're the first time. But once you work more with the code, you just know at some point.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
but-
there is many user models. I mean, so
And no, it's one user model we care about. Yes, there are two user models, I think, and the difference between that, and maybe I'll explain it now then since we're at it. So we have a user that's defined by Django, because Django is made to make things easy, right? So they have already predefined a lot of things, so you can just start working, and for a basic situation, you can just use the user that they have inside. So, but we have a second user which we defined because the basic Django user model has only email, first name, last name, and password, let's say. So it has only this information. But for our app, we want much more for the user. We want to know, okay, which location they are, which street they have, which phone number they have. So you kind of extend that basic Django user model, and then you add all this information. So that's why you have two user models. One is, let's say, kind of like Cotown user that has all the information that's specific to the Cotown app. And one is the basic Django user model that has the first name, password, and so on. So in the end, we work with it's one user model, but it's split in two. So the information is split in two. And yeah, so in the end, you know, because it's only one user model in the end that you work with.
But can you control P and type user? Okay, because so here you have user dot.
No, we need models and then accounts. And here we'll have the, wait, here. So this is the user model. This is the user model that is needed for Cotown. And here you can see the link. So our user model is a foreign key to the Django user model. So it means that inside this Django user we have the email, first name, last name, password, but all the other information that has to do with our app, nickname, mobile, date of birth, whatever, is inside this user model.
Anything we want to add to the user, we add it here.
Yeah, because you cannot add directly to the Django user model. Django doesn't allow you to change the user model that it has. So that's why one of the methods to approaching that is to do it like that. So you just say, okay, we have a foreign key that links to the Django user, and then you add all the other information here.
So this is a little bit confusing because if I am telling you about Laravel, say create model user, okay, which is connected to the database user, and the class is going to be called user, so we just call everything the same. That's very simple. Here, this class user has another user, which is Django user, and extends it and matches it perfectly one-to-one, plus addition. But see, what is confusing me, it's in file called accounts. So it's in models.py, but which is in folder accounts.
Yeah.
Which is the app account.
But this is the app accounts that has to do with all the accounts on the app.
Exactly. So, but if I want to use the same user who is logged in my app,
So in tasks, for example.
Then you import the user model from this. So you
From
say
this one.
import from accounts models.py, import user. And then you use the same user model.
okay, if I want to use that one, but if I want to use just Django built-in user, then I import
Then,
that
then
one
you
instead.
can
Okay,
go.
clear.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, cool.
So that's why there are two users, but in the end, it's one user that's split in two parts, kind of. So one part that is the base Django part, and one that is our added values.
Realistically, I don't think you would ever import just the Django user.
Yeah, you don't need that unless you need to do something with password, email, and first name, because don't forget those fields are inside the Django user.
Yeah, because if you extend the Django user one-to-one to
Yeah.
that user, can you not access those fields through that one?
Yeah, and exactly. Remember the double underscore. You said user double underscore username. So it means it comes here and then it looks inside the Django user to find the username.
So you don't really need to import the Django user.
No,
anymore.
no, you can do everything because they are related. Yeah, so you have this relation. So that means you have access through this model to the Django
So
model.
you import the Django user here, and then you import this one to any place you want.
Yeah, so this is the one that you care in the end about, this user model.
Does it explain everything about users? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on with our example. So where were we?
So we create an activity. So
Okay, we
that was
create
did the URLs.
Okay,
In the
yeah.
URLs, you define,
Yeah.
okay, I want activity slash suggest whatever.
Yeah, okay, cool.
And then you have the view that takes care of this URL that's associated with it. And then once you create the view, then you create the serializer, basically to serialize all the information that comes.
So once again, okay, so I'm submitting, okay, I'm creating a new activity, okay?
Yeah.
So I have the URL, okay?
Yeah.
I have my model activity.
Yeah.
I have to create the migration for the database.
Yeah.
So that will be exactly like my model. It will have the same fields, but when I run that migration, it will create inside Postgre, whatever it's using those tables that I. Migration is, you know, you need to add new table to the database. Okay, and in add to new table to the database, you create a thing called migration, which is a file which says it will have these fields, and then you run that file, and then it creates your table in the database.
You don't want to manually add fields and
Yeah.
tables in database on production, for example,
Yeah.
either, because it's not.
Yeah.
It's
And
just
then,
bad practice.
and then in every other server that you install this, you just run migrations, and then it creates
It
all
will
the tables.
set up the
for
database for you, basically.
And then you can have multiple migrations, because let's say you add a field, you don't edit your first migration, you add a column, okay? You don't edit this one, you just add another migration which says add that column, okay? So when you run the migrations on old servers, it will say, okay, I ran this one before, so I'm not going to run it again, but this is a new one, I'll just add that column. If you run it to a new server, it will execute both migrations, so it will create the first table, and then it will update it with what you have. This is exactly the same in a Laravel
Yeah,
system.
in a lot of systems.
Do
yeah.
that through manage.py?
Sorry?
You do that
Yes.
through manage.py?
Yeah, make migration. So migration is basically instructions to how to set up the table, how to set up the database. That's one. And second, it's a history. It's a history of all your changes to the database. So what Andrew said, if you add a field, it will remember, okay, that you added the field after the first migration, so then you have two migrations. And the more you modify, it's also good to have this history so you can go back, for example. If you did some changes and you're not satisfied with that field, you can always go back in history, and it's called rollback migrations.
Yeah. Okay, so I create migration, so I have my table, I have my model, okay, which is exactly the same, has the same fields, okay? And then my request, when I finally submit the data on that URL in that structure, comes here, okay? So it's in JSON, I understand that. So you have to serialize this shit, so you have to convert it, so you have to say when in JSON this field name will be a string, this name description will be some sort of text field, this name date will be date field or whatever it is, so it knows how to destructure this data.
So for that you create a new file or folder, serializer.py, and there you keep your logic with that.
Yeah.
And basically within a serializer you do exactly that. You do define the fields, so basically the same fields exactly as it's in your database, and then you connect it to the model. So you say model equals activity. So basically you connect the model to activity, so it knows, okay, whatever changes, any operations that I do, all these operations will have to do with this model. So then you kind of connect it together, the DRF with the Django application.
So this is all the preparation work, okay? And now I say, okay, fair enough, that's all good. I have already built in create function, okay? So I don't actually have to do anything. I just call that URL and it will create the user. And if I say patch, it will update the user, and you know. And we also had validators, okay, and permissions. So first we check can user do that, but we also validate the data as we have seen
as you
before.
can see here as well in the task.
Know, so we can validate is name entered, is it really a string, you know, does it is it less than 500 characters, so we can validate those conditions whatever we want.
Yeah.
Okay.
For example, for validation, this is also a DRF thing. always if you want to validate a field from here, you always need to name it validate underscore and the name of the field. And that way DRF knows, okay, he wants an additional validation on this field.
Okay.
So that's why you will see here validate city like this, validate primary image. That's one thing. And then you can do a general validation, which is just called validate. So basically, DRF, whenever he deserializes, it goes through a series of steps. So the first step is, okay, I receive the data. Second is I validate the data, so it goes through all the validation functions. Third is, first step it receives the data. Second step, it transfers the data into something it understands, so it converts it. So that's, I don't know if they have it here, but it's a specific function called to internal value or something. So it transforms all the JSON data into something DRF understands, then it validates it, then it runs the creation, whatever you defined it to be, you want to create or update, and then it makes the representation of it, so it gathers it as a response and then it sends it back. So it always does these steps.
Okay, so in this view pie that we have, we can right now we can only write our custom functions. Okay, so so create we don't need to write as far as I understand, unless we want to do some different
Extra stuff on it,
different stuff with creation.
Overriding.
Yeah, overriding. Okay, so for example here, what is probably not defined is a specific request, like, okay, I want to see all the activities in my area, or I want to see all the activities on Saturday, okay? So I guess that would be a new route, which will then call this view, and then I define that function, which then returns what we were seeing before, it returns some information back.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's pretty much how it works.
Exactly, yeah, because at its simplest level with DRF, if you have very, very simple requests, literally all you need is to add a view here, say serializer class equals that, and then in the serializer, you just add the model and the fields, and that's it. And then you have already a working API because DRF already knows how to do post requests. So it knows that post means create. So if you say a post with this information, it will automatically create the object for you. So you can keep it extremely minimal with DRF. But if you have a bit more advanced functionality, which is our case, then you need to go a bit more in depth into it and override functions. But at its minimal, you only literally can write 10 lines of code and you'll have a running small API. And that's why we use DRF, because it's made for that. It's made to be very simple. So
does it make sense? Okay.
So basically you could do here task list create, we have this, right? So because you always import from other class, right? So we have list create API view, and list is exactly for what Andra said. List is for listing stuff. So it's a class that knows exactly how to retrieve things from database and list them. So you don't need to do much in this case, it will just work, let's say so. And that's why you need to specify which class you want. So here is list create, so it knows that you here on this request you can list things and you can create things. It means you can retrieve and you can post to it. So yeah, I mean, it's once you understand it, it makes a lot of sense, but it's hard to understand it at first because a lot of it happens in the background. So let's say here, if I want to make a list, a simple list for task list, then I literally can just write serializer class task serializer, then go inside the serializer, write my fields, and write here in the meta model equals task, and that's it. And you whenever now you will post a GET request to that URL, you will retrieve back the list because DRF already knows how to make this communication.
But then you will retrieve all the tasks.
Yeah. For example, list is for retrieving all the tasks. Retrieve is for retrieving only one thing.
Okay.
And that's why they grouped them also in more common things. So commonly on one API you want to do list and create, right? So you have either list the task or I want to add a new task on the same URL. So that's why they group them, and that's why in some other ones, I don't know, like, yeah, anyways, this is something you just need to see inside the serializer itself. But yeah, list create API view or simple list API view, which means he only knows how to list things. This one knows how to list and how to create things. And this one knows how to retrieve one object, update one object, and destroy one object. So it all depends on the classes you inherit here.
Yeah. So I want to today to cover two more things, okay? So one is how to debug the shit, okay? And the second one is a little bit more about salary to figure out, okay, I have a background task, so which is scheduled for every day at 12 o'clock, okay? I need to send one email. Or if I call specific URL, so it's processed by Django, how does the Django trigger salary to create a task? So, so maybe we can just spend 5-10 minutes about debugging. So, how do you debug this stuff? How do I see variables? How do I see what is calling what?
Yeah, that's a bit more tricky because I don't know whether it's set up here or not. And I think I wrote some documentation for that, but normally, you just run it here and then it should. But yeah,
Here
here.
it's set up, and we tried to follow the documentation.
Yeah.
We tried to do the same exact stuff, but it doesn't work for us.
Yeah, this is gonna be more complicated because I don't.
Okay, well, you have a documentation which says, okay, there is.
No, it's running now. Okay, so
It's
this
running,
is
yeah, it's connected.
Yeah.
So if you now make a request,
Do we
then
have-
I can see my variables, I can see my call stack, I can see the processes and so on. I guess you can put breakpoints.
Can I don't know. Can I send the request from here? Was it? I don't remember what port was it in.
wl.goton.local.
Yeah, but is it running? I don't know.
It's not running.
Quota.
Or API
Yeah.
local admin. Okay, improperly. Okay, this is some issues now with the activities URL. Let me.
Yeah, we.
Okay, we don't have it here.
I think you just need to add /admin.
Yeah, but
No, but I would just
you
remove
can't
fully that
compile,
app now.
You can't compile. Okay. So Valentin, don't worry too much about it. Let me just ask you a few questions. Okay. So you installed this debugger, which is like Xdebugger in PHP. So I assume with this debugger, when you make a request in browser, for example, if you put a breakpoint, it will stop executing there, and you can see all the variables and all the call stack, and then you can go step by step.
Yep.
Is it exactly the same like PHP?
Yeah. It's universal debugging. So you put a breakpoint, it stops. You can see all the variables. It's exactly the same.
Okay, so the only problem that we have to have on our local machine is figure out how to set up that debugger so that can be a task for next week. Okay, and
But here it
because-
seems to be running. For
Yeah, it
example.
seems to be running. So debugging, same thing like PHP. But is there a way to dump data like console logs and shit like that? So I
You
don't.
can just write print.
Where does it write? If I put print somewhere.
It will write it in the.
It's probably in window.
It should write in the logs, but I don't remember where the logs are here.
So if I say print, it goes to the log.
It should go to the log journal.
Because,
yeah, it goes to the
because
output.
DJ was asking about logger before, so it doesn't.
I mean,
need-
log has to do. I mean, you can use logging as well. Yeah, you can use that. I mean, print is not the recommended way, but if you just use it and then delete it, it's fine. Logging is more for production level already. If you want to have, you don't use prints in production, you use logging, let's say so. But for simple development stuff on your local, you can use print. It's no
And
issue.
then it prints to the.
And then it prints to wherever the log is, but I don't remember exactly where it is.
Okay, but there's some log file somewhere. Okay.
But let's say generally, I didn't use print as much. The only thing that I used was the debugger. I put the breakpoint where I need it, and then I just check there what it is.
And then you can see, what is the request, what is self, what is pretty
Yeah.
much.
You click Control P, you can't find log.
I try to remember how it was. No, it wasn't here.
It doesn't matter. There is a file.
There
which,
is somewhere a file that has to do with the logging. Yeah.
Okay. So basically, debugging shouldn't be hard. The hard bit is to set it up. Once you set it up,
Yeah.
it's very similar to what we described before. So pretty much exactly the same, actually.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, of course, if you run Postman and make these requests in Postman, then you can also see what it returns, so you don't even have to have a website or a mobile app running, making those requests as such.
So here I think, I mean, we can try already. Let's see. Oh, thing is I don't remember.
This is tasks.
Yeah, I mean, we can try still. Oh, I just don't remember which URL was it. Task, retrieve, update, delete. Have
It's
URL
like
dot
task
py.
details, but isn't this for like
Task, retrieve, update, delete. I don't see it here. Oh, okay, it's here. So it was, okay, but you need to know some IDs or something.
you can just fake the ID, right?
I don't know, I can try. But basically I think normally it should work if you say API down local and then,
Task.
was it just task?
Task underscore the ID.
No, slash, and now the ID, and then slash details.
Was it tasks? Okay. Tasks and then ID, but I don't know what was it like. I don't know 3 F G H V, whatever details. I don't know. Yeah, so it works. So it stopped here, and now here you can see all the information. So everything that's included in the self. So a lot of it has to do with Django and DRF. So it might be overwhelming at first, but with time you'll know exactly what you need from here. So here you can see the QArgs, for example, PK, that's our ID that we send, so that's always sent with the request, so you can access it. These are a lot of stuff that you don't need. You have the request here with all its data, and you can see auth none because I guess I'm not authenticated as a user or something like that. But yeah, basically it works.
Okay.
So here it's set up correctly.
Okay, so we'll set it up. Then of course, if something doesn't work, we'll figure it out together. Okay, so any other questions about this? Because this is very straightforward once you have it up and running, it seems. Okay,
Yeah.
so I don't want to waste too much time on it. Salary.
Yeah. So whenever you configure Celery the first time, you make a kind of link between it and Django. And I think that link is, I mean, one of it that's celery.py, that here you start the Celery app, basically. And I'm not sure, I think I need that. And here, yeah, and here basically you link it with Django. So it's just a basic setup way where whenever you Google how to set up Django with Celery, they're gonna give you it's a few steps and then you're set up. You don't need.
It's in the documentation of Kotlin.
Sorry?
I think it's in Kotlin.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not sure because I didn't set it up. It was set up before, but basically it's a few straightforward things, and then, I mean, depends what you want to do with Celery. But let's say, where was it?
Well, I gave two use cases. So one is how to set up
Scheduling, and one
a
is-
task at 12 o'clock at Celery to send the email or something like
Let
that.
me
And the other one is how to actually trigger a task. Tell Celery, you know, send an email in the background to
Yes.
this
Let me
user.
see where it.
So let's just say that after the
think
user,
here.
the citizen submits the task, we will send an email.
So it's not complex. It's basically you define some methods inside the file. Like here, vendors.py. These are all methods executed by Celery, and then you tell Django. Whenever you tell Django to execute that method, you put a decorator. You write something like @ and then task or something like that. So Django knows everything that has this decorator on top of it, I send to Celery. So I'm not sure here, let's see, for example, we have send SMS, for example. Let's find where else this function is called. So we have it in models, vendors.py, have it here.
Shouldn't it be in communication?
Wait, go back to the previous one. Isn't that the add limits calls to period 300?
No, but maybe. Could be actually, yeah. That's not the one I know at least,
Shouldn't
but
it be in communication?
Yeah, but this line 758, okay, that you just had, okay, this seems like
this is the decorator here. what I
yeah,
was talking about.
that seems like okay. So you make maximum of 2 calls of this background task. So 2 tries, okay. So first try, if it fails, you try one more time, and if it fails again, don't try again, because if you don't specify that, it will keep trying.
I know what it is. That's the function that limits how many times the user can request a new OTP.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like 2 2 times per 300 seconds.
Yeah, and then that is timeout as well, you know, so you can define those.
Maybe search for validate notification.
Okay.
Push notification.
Here. Here's the decorator I was thinking, the task. So now whenever this function is going to be called, Django knows that this is a celery task.
Okay.
So this is what you add on top, basically.
Okay, but let's say I want to create a new one to send an email to person who creates my activity.
Yeah, then you write add task and give it a name, and then define your logic of sending an email that creates your activity.
Okay, so let's just hold on here for 1 second. So I call some URL, okay, and in my view I define a function which handles that URL. Yep. All right. So I have my activity view, which I want to say. Okay, I say end task. Okay. But how does it know? Do I have to import some stuff before?
Yes.
Okay.
So here you can see from celery, you import tasks.
so
From celery decorators, import task.
Yeah. Okay.
So here, maybe it's easier. Let me see, where was this called? So this has to do with push notifications. So basically what happens here, Django at some point, somewhere in the code will call this function send push notifications with all the details and so on. And this function now calls the celery function, which is defined just here, and it's called send push assi, which is for asynchronous, I guess. So that's how you call a celery task. You say the name of the task, dot delay, and then you pass in the variables. So this is a specific way of calling celery tasks. So here, now when you call this one, it will call this thing here, and Django knows, aha, this is a celery task. I called it with this dot delay function, whatever, and now it will execute this one inside celery. So Django won't execute this anymore.
Okay, so but scroll up. Okay, so so see line 123 it says send underscore push underscore assi,
Yeah.
and then in 145 there is that send underscore push.
Exactly, that's the method it calls.
Okay, so that's the method. But because we put this decorator before that, it also knows this is.
The decorator plus here, if this is not standard way to call a function, right? Usually you call the function, brackets, and then you pass the parameters. But here you call the function, add dot delay, and then you pass the parameters.
Okay.
So this is a specific way of calling celery functions.
Okay.
But like at task, does that mean it's from the task API or it's like
Add task is the celery thing.
Yeah, if you go all the way up
Because-
to the top, you can see that you import that celery decorators at like task.
Yeah.
yeah,
So
but
so
we also did it as we
so this has nothing to do with the code on tasks.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
celery task. That's how celery calls these things. It calls
it's
them tasks.
in Laravel you have a job. So task is a job.
yeah, I get it.
Okay.
Can you go a little bit up? All the
Yeah.
way up?
All the way.
Yeah. So you have, there's,
So here you see periodic task, for example, which is what it means. So this means this task will be executed periodically.
yeah, so we can do add periodic task.
Yeah, add periodic task, and then I mean, of course, check the documentation to see what parameters it take. But I imagine if you write here add periodic task name send push, and then you call this send push assi, then it will make it periodic. So periodically, it will keep on doing it. Celery.
You probably have an extra parameter for
Yeah, like period, whatever. Yeah.
So if I look at this code, and Valentin, please correct me if I'm wrong, just stay there, okay? So 150 imports user device. So what I assume, because this is a push notification, I need to have some device ID to which I will push this. Okay, so it gets that. And then there is a try, catch, or, because it can fail, so we catch and handle the errors, okay, which makes perfect sense. So device gets the device ID and then calls the function which is defined in this model, send message, and the parameters are title. Okay, so what's the title of my push message? Was the contents, and then it's a plugin activity. It has default sound, so it will beep whatever is your default sound in your phone. Okay, does it display any icon in your notifications or not? And then if it has additional data that your app will process once it's done.
Where do you get this message if it fails?
Where do you?
Get this message if it fails?
This one.
Yeah.
I mean, you write it, you just declare
Yeah,
it
but
here.
this is a function. So something called this function. So let's say in our example, what I was saying, you call the URL, okay, which will call this function eventually and set up this background task, okay? So whoever calls this needs some information back. So on my web page where you click the URL, okay, I want a message, either task says, push sent successfully or it failed. So I have something listening for this notification. Once I receive the notification, I update my a thing with a message, either this or that.
Yeah, I get it.
Is that all correct?
Mhm.
Okay.
If we want to check who's receiving the emails, will it be in vendors.py?
What do you mean, who's receiving the emails?
So, what users are receiving the email?
Could
So
be,
right
I
now,
guess.
I have a task where I need to not send emails to blocked users, for example. Do I check here in the vendors?
I mean, you can start from here because here is where the actual sending happens. And you can start from here, from down, and go all the way to the top to see where the information is received for which are the users. So,
Yeah. So I would assume that you have something which sends emails to all the users. So basically, the first step would be to give me all the users, go through them, and for each one of them, send a message. I guess that's the part of the code.
But if you just, I think it's a little bit up. There is notification.user.user.
Hmm?
Yeah,
here.
yeah. So notification.user.user.email.
Yeah.
How do you know which user and which notification? Like, okay, we can go to notifications if we.
I mean, first of all, see where this is called. So,
Yeah.
so you need to find out what this notification
So
is.
for each user, you will call this function to send them a notification. You don't have a function send to all users immediately, okay? You have many background tasks that happen one after
You
another.
would be able to do it self.user.status, like if they're blocked. I don't know if it's status or like if it's
Yeah.
blocked or whatever. Like,
But you were asking where it happens here apparently. So here here and probably in some other places, but here is where you decide who do you send it to. So this is the notification object. It has user and citizens, for example. So here it has the list of citizens is going to be sending this notification.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, you start from there. In vendors, basically, it's all the information that has to do with sending stuff. Push, SMS, emails. So if you have some with emails, start from there, see who calls those functions, and make your way up the chain, up the function calls to see which is the main function that starts everything.
Okay, so we are roughly around 2-hour mark, a few minutes over. So are there any other burning questions?
What is static method here? Static method.
That's a Python thing, basically. It means that this method doesn't belong to the class. So whenever you create a new instance of the class, this method doesn't belong to that instance, it belongs to all the instances. So it means you can call this method without having instantiated this class.
Yeah, so it's the same thing in object-oriented programming. So to call the function in a class, you have to make instance. Unless you make that function static, then you can always call it even without making instance.
Okay.
That's the same thing. Okay, so I think we covered quite a lot. I think this was quite useful. So I want to say that Valentin justified my introduction. So as you can see, he kicks ass even if he didn't use this for months now. It's just it's natural to him. So thank you very much, Valentin.
Thank you very much, Andres.
Okay.
Thank you. Hope it was useful. And,
No, it was great, man. Thank you very much.
But yeah, documentation.